Hello and welcome. My name is John Michalishin, and I'm here today with George Porter and Jack Ravel. George is our brand new senior pastor at Southwick Community Episcopal Church. Jack Ravel is our worship leader. Today, we're going to be talking about the next chapter of our church life.
Okay, well, this church community was established in 2005 under the leadership of Father Taylor Albright. And in addition to the usual things you'd expect to see in church, like sermons and worship services, the church is connected with the community in some unusual ways. We've had chili cook-offs, selfies with Santa right before Christmas, vacation Bible school, a donation of turkeys to needy families around Thanksgiving, all based on the words of Jesus calling us to love one another. But Father Taylor was called away to another location, and so that brought us into our current chapter of looking for a new leadership in our church community.
So today we're going to be talking about that next chapter, and who better to ask than the person who was called by God to take up the mantle and move us forward. So George, we're going to talk a little bit about your vision for this church.
So George, how did you first come to be aware of the need for this leadership position in our church?
Well, I've been looking to come back to this part of the world really for quite some time. I used to live in Northborough, Massachusetts before moving back to Canada. And I've been in Canada for the past 18 years. And then I was looking to come back to this part of the world. And I knew the Reverend Rich Simpson, who works out of the bishop's office for congregations in transition. And he and I had a discussion about coming back to this area. And he said that he thought I should wait a little bit to see what happened with this particular congregation, because it was going to come open. And he said that he thought this would be a good fit between the congregation and myself and the congregation here.
And what it is about the church that you feel like it's the right fit for you and the right fit for this body of believers?
There are a number of things, but I think what initially caught my attention was a description of the church as being a church for people who don't like church. And I thought that this must be a place where people are willing to try different things and to experiment with different ways of reaching people with the good news that God loves us and that we're called together to love God. I also saw in it a place where people were doing lots of ministry, and one of my deep beliefs is that my role as a pastor is not to do the work of the church, that the church is to do the work of the church, and my role is to equip and encourage and release people to do that work.
So George, could you take us on a brief journey through your life and ministry?
Well, I grew up in a rural area, and in my early teens went in kind of a wild direction. And I encountered Christ when I was 16 at a Youth for Christ meeting. And from that time, there was a big change in my life, and my direction changed. And so when I was 17 and graduating from high school, I had to make a decision whether I would accept a scholarship to a drama school or whether I would choose to go to Bible school and study the Bible and study theology. And a number of people encouraged me to go that direction, and I did ultimately go that direction, spent a number of years studying Bible and studying theology. And I became a pastor in another denomination and served there for some time, and worked with the Mennonite Central Committee in Indigenous Affairs, and did various kinds of things. But felt a little bit restless about where I was at in the church. And it was when I started to reflect on some of the people that I read and some of the people that I respect, and thought, well, I'll give the Anglican Church a try. And so I found a home in the Anglican Church of Canada, and I was ordained in Episcopal Cree Nation in northern Manitoba as a deacon, and then later at the cathedral as a priest, and have been serving in a variety of capacities as a parish priest and pastor, as a youth pastor, and I've worked out of the diocesan office as a youth director for an entire diocese too. Most recently, I was in Thunder Bay, and before coming here, pastoring a church that was also looking to find different ways of doing ministry, different ways of doing worship, and finding ways of welcoming people into the community of the church.
We've heard that you have quite the extensive library back at home and in your office. What types of authors have influenced your philosophy and have guided your spiritual journey?
Different authors, I would say, over different periods of time in my life. Francis Schaeffer was an influence at one point in my life, but there are some people who have remained and consistently. C.S. Lewis would be one. Marcus Bork is another. And N.T. Wright, is a bishop in the Church of England, but also an Oxford scholar in New Testament and history. So those are some of the people who have stuck with me in their books. That's
all right. I'm curious. We've heard you say that the two biggest problems facing the church is that people outside the church don't like church. And also, maybe a little more surprisingly, people in church don't like the people outside of the church. How are we going to address this issue, do you think?
I think that we have to be aware of why people don't like church. And we see over the past years how congregations have declined and churches have closed and those kind of things. And people have tried lots of different sort of gimmicky things to reach out that have either not succeeded or temporarily succeed. But I think being aware of what it is about church that people don't like, and Andy Stanley talks a lot about how we don't want to put things in the way of people getting to hear the gospel and getting to become part of the church. And I think identifying those things that people don't like, and I don't mean just whims, but things that people really don't like, and addressing those issues takes part of that, the threat of church away and the things that people come to expect. And hopefully, if they're part of coming into here, are surprised not to find. And I think for the other way, making people aware of how we as Christians come across to people who are maybe not part of the church, and how we convey dislike may be too strong a term, but how we convey that people outside of the church are not welcome. Mm-hmm. Even though our sign says that they're welcome, our actions sometimes don't welcome people.
The churches are made up of people and individuals, but also of children and families. What type of priorities are you going to put on youth and family ministries in this church?
Well, I think in my history as a pastor and as a priest, that youth have been a big component of my ministry. During this COVID pandemic, a lot of people haven't felt safe bringing their children into the building, and So during my time here, there haven't been very many children or young people in the church. But my hope is to spend some time identifying them, getting to know the families together, and building some relationships. Priority-wise, I would say that integrating children into the whole life of the church, integrating young people into the whole life of the church so that they have many relationships with people within the church, that's going to be one of the key things. The other thing that I would like to do is to, in context of relationship, intrigue young people, ask them to, invite them to think through what they believe and why they believe what they believe and how that influences their life or doesn't influence their life.
So the COVID pandemic is an ongoing issue that we read about in the papers, and it's changing week by week. But where we sit right now, what is your plan, and can people feel safe coming to a community meeting like we have here?
Well, as you said, things change on an ongoing basis, so we keep monitoring what's being said and what's going on, and we keep monitoring the impact of infections and so on. But we here at Southwick Church are doing as much as we can to minimize the risk for people, and at the same time respect where people are at in dealing with the COVID realities. And so some people feel like it's safe to come back if they're masked. Some people feel like it's safe to come back even without a mask. And there are others who don't feel it's safe to come back either way at this point in their life. And so we want to respect all of those various differences. And we have an open gathering in which people can participate as much as they feel comfortable. And we're also going to continue the YouTube broadcasts for people who maybe aren't comfortable yet to come back. And hopefully, we see the end of this pandemic, however it winds down, however it changes, and people will be able to fully join together again in worship here.
Let's just say someone with absolutely no connection to the church whatsoever would drop in for a visit. How should they expect to be received?
Well, I think that this church does a very good job of welcoming people who just drop in. It's happened a number of times since I've been here that people have just dropped in, and rather than just going through the formalities of introduction or even ignoring them, this is a welcoming place, and people do welcome people in. They invite them to take part in the coffee hour and take part in the worship and try to get to know a little bit about them, without at the same time overwhelming them or making them feel like they're being recruited. It's just a welcome, like you have a visitor and a guest, and some choose to stay and some choose not to, and that's fine with us here. And I think that welcome is what people should expect when they come in.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think our time's just about done for today, but I want to thank our viewers for spending some of their time with us today. Hopefully they've gathered enough nuggets of information that might encourage them to come by and visit us, just like that person we just got done talking about. George, is there anything you'd like to leave with the viewers in addition to what we've already talked about?
Yeah, I think people should know when if they come to Southwick Church, they'll find some things that are familiar, some things that the prayers and the Eucharist and some of the music, they'll find that it's familiar. But they'll also find things that are different, that it's a less formal, less structured sort of worship service, and that people are invited to participate in it at their comfort level. And just a reminder that people who aren't comfortable can pick up the service on the YouTube channel.
Perfect. Thanks so much, gentlemen, for having this conversation today, and hopefully that might touch somebody just the right way.
Well, thank you both.